Welcome to I Love Black People, and thank you for joining us on this journey. I'm your host, Sinclair Skinner, co-founder of iloveblackpeople.com. And today we have, a guest that's been here and really has been helping us build the foundation of this actual show, where we actually have the Global Black Agenda meeting, Revolutionary Innovation. We are the revolution. We are the innovation.
Today's episode of I Love Black People on Howard University Radio Voices on Sirius XM 141 is brought to you by the Global Green Book, a Black Survival Guide, the Global Green Book 2020, the Healthcare Edition, which identifies Black-friendly and Black-owned healthcare providers worldwide. A Black Survival Guide highlighting places across the globe for Black people, the Global Green Book, available on Amazon and iloveblackpeople.com. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.
I have today with us good, amazing, dynamic, wonderful sister, Dreisen Heath. Thank you for joining us today, sis.
Thank you, Brother Sinclair. Good to be here, and really appreciate this conversation.
Well, we appreciate you. If we don't say it enough, our young folks that are doing amazing work to continue the struggle for the liberation of our people. I know, again, there's not a lot of trophies or awards shows for this, but we definitely want to give you your flowers now. And we really appreciate the work you and so many faceless people who consistently been about making sure Black folks get their reparations in these United States. And I think, again, as we go through each chapter of this movement, this episodic ordeal we've been going through and wrestling with the repair and making sure we're given what's due. There's a big update in the legislative space, I guess, from the work you've been doing with all the other folks who have been super helpful. What kind of update can you give us today?
Absolutely. We're riding on that momentum still from the hearing from last month, and are very welcomed by the support that's been articulated multiple times by President Biden and his press secretary publicly, as well as getting additional co-sponsors. So right now we're at 169 co-sponsors of HR 40 in the House of Representatives, 18 co-sponsors in the Senate. And so we're really moving here, and are gearing up for a vote in Judiciary Committee, which should come in a few weeks from now. So we're really excited to have a majority of the Judiciary Committee on, as well as commitments from those who have not co-sponsored the bill to vote yes when the bill comes before the Judiciary Committee. We still have some outliers. Primarily, the largest list of outliers is what is often deemed as vulnerable Democrats, which are in districts that are white majority population districts. And so that's where we have the largest swath of non-co-sponsors of the bill. But we still have several CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional Hispanic Caucus members who are not on the bill, such as Representative Antonio Delgado from the 19th District in New York, Representative Lucy McBath, who sits on the House Judiciary Committee in Georgia's 6th District, which sits above Atlanta, Representative Lauren Underwood in Illinois' 14th District, and Mr. Donald McEachin in Virginia's 4th District, who was a co-sponsor of HR 40 in the 116th Congress. So we look forward to him coming on in a few weeks, if not days. So we're just gearing up for this House Judiciary Committee vote, again, which would be a historic step because the bill has never been voted out of committee. And we need that step prior to getting the bill to the floor of the House of Representatives.
And you said McEachin, that's in Virginia?
In Virginia, yes. So the start,
Okay.
the start of it
You
all.
know, yeah, I think that's a good point you said. Brother McKeechin, we need you to come on and sign on this bill. If anybody has any friends and family in Virginia, I think he's the 4th district. Please make sure you reach out to this good brother. He was with us last year, and more than just body signed on. Definitely, we need as many signatures. I think one of the things that is important with the information you're giving us is making sure the listeners know how they can participate. Again, Sister Heath is giving us names of Congress people who we would think traditionally would support our ability to have a study. And this, again, remember, this is not actually getting the actual reparations. So we know that we are due these reparations. And even with the unreadiness that some may have, this is a study. So for people to be holding out and supporting something to study, I think, again, we need to hold everyone accountable. We've been supporting bills like for 15, supporting bills for stimulus, package relief, making sure that we are getting the support we deserve uniquely, specifically for us as a people. We need to make sure these allies, if we're talking about immigration, the Congressional Black Caucus has been there for those allies. We're talking about other constituents. We consistently show up on the right side of history repeatedly. We need everyone. If you got folks who are in, again, I think you mentioned there are folks in these congressional districts where they lean with the predominantly a white constituency. Well, we need white folks who believe that is just justice needs to be served for this population of wonderful, beautiful Black fellow Americans. So again, I think it's so helpful that you've been able to kind of spell out timelines. We should see this, God willing, coming out of the Judiciary Subcommittee in the next few weeks. That's the type of information we need so that people can kind of focus the agenda on this issue. There are other agenda issues that folks may have, but just know that there's a time frame that this particular matter, as it relates to our reparation, is now at the front of the queue, and it needs that last push to support all the wonderful organizations, new and old, that are continually pushing forth for our reparations. So, with that being said, what would you say? I think with some of the other jurisdictions, municipalities, and states, what have been some of the updates in some of those areas as it relates to legislation or anything like that?
Right. The national conversation is incredibly important and should not replace the need for local jurisdictions to look inward to how their constituencies, particularly descendants of enslaved Africans, have been impacted by harmful state and local policies that have disenfranchised and dehumanized Black folks over decades. So this was a big week actually for local reparations, and particularly in the state of Illinois. So we have Evanston, Illinois, that's preparing to vote on March 22nd, the city council, on their reparations measure. So if you recall, Evanston, Illinois, at the leadership of the formidable Alderwoman Robin Ruth Simmons, she's just been showing incredible leadership and initiative and really driving this forward and creating a national model for other cities to replicate. Evanston approved a measure in 2019 to financially compensate Black residents for wealth and opportunity gaps from structural systemic racism. This reparations fund is $10 million over 10 years, primarily from a cannabis revenue tax, 3% tax on the cannabis revenue, in addition to community donations. And so the city adopted that measure, and now they're voting on where they're going to specify and disperse the initial funding. So in Evanston, you have history of, racially targeting, discriminatory targeting of Black people using drugs. You have a long history of housing discrimination. So the reparations program's first phase is going to examine qualifying residents to get I believe, $25,000 to use towards home ownership, home improvement, mortgage assistance. So they will be voting on that on March 22nd. And that's, an incredible advancement, because we're talking about implementation now. And we're talking about implementation based off of policies in Evanston, from the early 1900s to mid, 1900s, that are still impacting Black people today. And that curbed their access to housing because of racist and discriminatory practices. In Chicago, this week, March 11th, the Subcommittee on Reparations within the Chicago City Council had its first public meeting. And that was huge because there's been a long stall in starting that first meeting. If you recall, and I should backtrack there, 18 of the 50 aldermen actually showed up and attended that meeting, and Cam Howard, national co-chair of NCOBRA, and Alderwoman Simmons gave remarks and testimony and urged Chicago to get moving on a holistic reparations plan for descendants of enslaved Africans in the Chicago area. You might recall that in Chicago, a torturous police ring led by police detective John Burge, from
Yes.
the 1970s and early 90s, brutalized over, hundreds of Chicagoans, primarily Black. And Chicago at the time, thereafter in 2015, approved a holistic $5.5 million reparations package. And that included an apology, financial compensation, reentry programming, job training, health, housing, and food assistance, free tuition at Chicago City colleges, a curriculum on the police torture victims in high schools, and plans for a permanent memorial. So Chicago needs to take that model that happened for the victims of police torture and then reinvent that for more holistically to reach those impacted by discriminatory policies and the legacy of slavery in Chicago.
Right.
Mhm.
So the Evanston is actually not a study. They're actually implementing reparations
Implementation.
based around their legislation. So I think that's a good point to make, and really kudos to them and as many other folks, no matter where you live, who you are, we need to make sure we repair the harm that's been done. And I think, again, as so many of us are focusing and keeping an eye on the ball on the federal level, there are other levels of government, as much as people talk about down ballots and different elected officials. This seems like one of the areas that we could actually spend time and act locally in making sure reparations are fulfilled. What other connections do you see with some of those municipalities?
Yeah, I mean, you have California last year signing their HR 40 style bill into law, into the state level, and they have been appointing members to that commission as of earlier this year. That task force will, examine the impacts of legacy of slavery in California. And that group expects to meet no later than June 1st of this year. So they're gearing up to appoint commissioners for that. You have Amherst, Massachusetts, a grassroots effort that started with two well-meaning white people with a petition effort. Shout out to Michelle Miller and Matthew Andrews, who saw the impacts that Black families are facing in Amherst. There's no coincidence that this college town has turned from, is now 75% white and 5% Black. That's no coincidence and that's no accident. So they have examined, the restrictive housing policies that prevented people from purchasing homes in that area, have gotten the city council to commit to a remedy plan for Amherst's Black residents. and, identify possible areas of legislative solutions. So, to ameliorate race-based policies that negatively impacted Black residents in the Amherst area. You have also institutions like the Episcopal Diocese, who over the last 2 years, we've seen several Episcopal dioceses, including ones in Maryland, New York, and Texas, launching reparations programs. Um, the largest pledge we've seen come out of Texas, allocating $13 million towards long-term programming. Um, but most recently, you had the Baltimore Episcopal Church, founded by slaveholders in the 1860s, allocating $500,000 for the next 5 years to establish a reparations fund. But you have hundreds of these initiatives popping all over the country. You have Portland, Oregon, issuing its annual federal policy to support reparations for Black people and for Indigenous people harmed by government policies. You have St. Paul, Minnesota City Council passing a resolution to create a reparations commission. You have Burlington, Vermont doing the same. You have Providence, Rhode Island doing the same. So it's really catching on across the country and gives imperative and urgency for the federal government to begin its course as well. These local initiatives cannot continue to move forward without, with federal inaction. The federal government has to move while these local efforts move.
I just had a brainstorm in my mind. Like, I think with the new movie that came out, Judas and the Black Messiah, and it's been getting awards, and it really speaks to the federal government's effort to undermine specifically our communities as descendants of enslaved African people, that we might need to give a shout out to those folks to make sure if they get some awards, to give a shout out to the Reparations Now piece. I think that's
Absolutely.
one of the things that we need to connect dots, like COINTELPRO, like this is the government, our tax dollars being used specifically to harm, literally murder and kill Black people, like not even like figuratively, like literally kill us. And I think that's why some of this conversation is important, to give people context. Like these aren't like benign activities of benevolent people. This stuff was torturous. This is something that's been going on. And even I think some of the previous things you said about how they're even assessing the things that happen actually after the formal end of slavery that continue to terrorize our community, destabilize and harm us specifically as a group and category. So I think, again, connecting those dots to the remedies that we're seeking out right now would probably help folks. Because again, I'm one of those folks, and I'm just projecting this. I want my check, but I definitely know there's people with different points of view. But it would definitely be helpful to let them know that they can have their voices heard and called into real action by getting behind the current legislation that's out there, as well as coming up with legislation even at the local level. Any last words you would want to say onto some of those issues as we wrap up?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right in terms of there being deliberate, torturous policies. Like, we cannot shy away from that. These are deliberate government choices or choices by non-state actors influenced or in partnership with the government to, take out Black people, to infringe on Black people's human rights. And that needs to be rectified. And, we talk about financial compensation, which is absolutely needs to be examined and calculated to its fullest extent. But we're also talking about, you brought up COINTELPRO for example. That is a program that the HR 40 Commission should fully examine. We have obviously research and scholarship to talk about those some of those impacts. But we're just hearing from Malcolm X's family a couple weeks ago about the true details, and that talks about institutional reform, guarantees of non-repetition. How do we guarantee that the federal government doesn't target another Black political activist that is working to re-enfranchise our people? How do we ensure not another police killing? How do we ensure not another, child, Black youth that commits suicide? Right now, Black youth suicide is the second leading cause of death for Black youth aged 10 to 19. So these types of guarantees of non-repetition, in addition to other forms of reparations, restitution, satisfaction, truth-telling measures, official apologies, rehabilitative services, trauma-informed care. The list goes on and on, because ultimately this holistic remedy needs to be proportional to the centuries of harm inflicted on Black folks.
And I think wrap it up with some also. I remember you said that this designation of reparations is outlined in like international law as related to the United Nations.
Right.
Can you elaborate just briefly on that, just so everybody knows that this is not something that we just made, that just came out of our experience, but has come out of other people's experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. The right to remedy and reparation is well defined in international human rights law, and has been for some time now, and has been applied in many different scenarios: post-conflict countries, wartime conflicts, wartime crimes, in addition to other major, serious, and gross human rights violations, such as enslavement, such as, genocides, such as sexual violence. All of these harms have to be rectified. So this isn't some abstract idea that people are talking about. Repair is necessary in order to move anything forward. There has to be repair, or else the conditions continue to worsen and are compounded over time. And obviously, we're seeing that play out. And if we wait any day, any year longer, the consequences are going to continue to be dire, and we're going to continue to see not only access death in the Black community, but loss of opportunity and growth of these just terrible inequality gaps.
Well, again, thank you so much, Sister Heath. Just appreciate you and the work you're doing. And again, we want to leave a world better than we found it. And I think we stand on, of course, the shoulders of so many of our ancestors that made sure that we could be here to even have a conversation like this on a satellite radio. So again, we're progressive, and we're progressing on this journey, and definitely appreciate all the sacrifices, along with all those others who we never get a chance to see, and they don't get trophies, but we're just so thankful for you. So I just want to leave, as we always start, I am because we are. And thank you so much, sister, for everything.
Thank you so much.
And now, Pan-African Healthful Tips from Nana Akua.
Greetings of peace. This is Nana Akua Zenzele, traditional healer, priest, and queen mother, with 20 years of experiences in the natural healing field. Today's helpful hint is on signs of toxicity. When determining how to heal the body, we must first do some type of self-evaluation or assessment. We will provide quick tips in making some small assessments or review of your personal well-being. We will provide quick tips on identifying when you are toxic or in need of a detox or cleansing regimen. Common signs of toxicity include bad breath, constipation, body odor, foul-smelling stools, coated tongue, headaches and joint pain, skin eruptions or breakouts, such as boils, cysts, or rashes. And some tools that you may use to determine the cause of the toxicity are assessments for a healthy diet, heavy metals, yeast or candida, parasites, and/or stress. Methods of cleansing and purification include cleansing regimens like fasting from solid or cooked foods or a raw food fast, fasting from sugar and sugary foods, fasting from high acidic foods, or fasting or eliminating common food allergens like wheat, corn, dairy, soy, or peanuts. Another cleansing method is cleansing herbs like slippery elm, burdock root, sheep sorrel, or turkey rhubarb. Another cleansing or purification method is taking foot or full body detox baths using herbs and essential oils, or cleansing the colon with the colon's enema system or other types of colon hydrotherapy. Feel free to message us on this platform to register for our self-healing series, where we will discuss these cleansing regimens in detail and provide over 10 self-assessment questionnaires and a self-care plan for when you're not well. And as always, I bid you good health and peace.
Today's episode of I Love Black People on Howard University Radio Voices on Sirius XM 141 is brought to you by the Global Green Book, a Black survival guide, the Global Green Book 2020, the Healthcare Edition, which identifies Black-friendly and Black-owned healthcare providers worldwide. A Black survival guide highlighting places across the globe for Black people, the Global Green Book, available on Amazon and iloveblackpeople.com. Special thanks to Banneker Communities.